Now I want to turn the rest of the morning over to Dr. Mel, who's going to introduce our speaker this morning. As you know, this is one of the unique traditions at UC Davis, having our graduating chief residents speak on the topic of their choice. There's no executive oversight on this activity, and it's been interesting over the years to have such a broad and wide-ranging opportunity to hear from our chief residents who have spent so much time with us. So, Dr. Mel.
Great, Dr. Farmer, thank you. It's really my pleasure to introduce Andrew Wishy for Grand Rounds this morning. I wanted to provide everyone with a brief background of his nonlinear pathway, which makes, in my mind, somewhat of a kindred spirit. He grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, on the Missouri side. He graduated high school in 2000, was actually drafted by the Los Angeles Dodgers as a professional baseball. He was drafted in sort of the later rounds, and so instead he decided to go to University of Arkansas as a student athlete on a baseball scholarship. He was interested in medicine even at that time, but the athletic director gave him guidance that at Arkansas, student athletes were really more athlete students, and so not to choose such a rigorous major. So he majored in music while he was there. He was there for 3 years. And then through the amateur draft was drafted by the Texas Rangers. He was in their organization for 3 years. He made it up as far as a single A ball, and then he was released. At that point, he spent a couple years in semi-pro league in the Northeast and decided to finish his undergraduate degree. He got his undergraduate degree in biology at the University of Missouri in Kansas City, 2010, so 10 years after he graduated high school. From there, he went to KCU Medical Branch for his DO, graduated in 2014. He went through an Air Force scholarship and has been here for his residency. This is PGY 6 for him. And when he leaves at the end of this spring, he'll be stationed in San Antonio. So great diverse background. Very interested to hear his talk. So, Dr. Wishy.
Well, good morning, UC Davis. I was pretty good welcome there. Thank you, Dr. Mel, for that gracious introduction, and thank you, everyone who decided to come here into the room this morning, and all of those online. I appreciate this opportunity to share my thoughts with you today. All right, so, lead by influence. What does that mean? At the end of 30 minutes, we'll kind of get to the end of what's taken almost about 30 years to figure out. The content of this talk is my own. I have no disclosures except I will not be discussing anything scientifically complicated, extremely dangerous, or particularly controversial. The idea of this talk started as me talking to me about what was going on with me. I'd been put in leadership roles, been told to be a leader, been told to step up. I wanted to do the very best job I could, but I didn't feel worthy. I felt like an imposter. I quickly realized, though, that this was not sustainable. Something had to change. I needed a strategy. I needed to pivot away from an intimidating mindset of leadership to a more manageable mindset of influence. My objectives and purpose for today are to define the difference between leadership and influence, discuss 3 common misconceptions of leadership, and 3 simple truths of influence. Lastly, to persuade you that leading with influence might be something you want to give a try. Let's begin with definitions. Leadership is the state or position of being a leader, the action of leading a group or an organization. As defined, I imagine leadership as a vast landscape of dry, cracked dirt that is crusty and lifeless. In contrast, influence is the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone or something. This definition seems more lush, colorful, and full of possibility. The way they are defined here makes them seem quite different, right? Now, that we're all oriented, let's dive into the discussion. Misconception number 1. Leadership is exclusive. Maybe you think, I'm not a leader. I'm not patient enough, smart enough, thoughtful enough, compassionate enough, dedicated enough, brave enough, moral enough, innovative enough, or eloquent enough to be a leader. If you don't see yourself up here, don't worry. There are no natural-born leaders. And you don't have to be them. You just have to be you. Simple truth number 1. Influence is inclusive. Everyone has influence, whether you like it or not. And there's just 4 main types: negative, neutral, positive, and life-changing. We all can relate to this. Bring up in your mind right now a vivid picture of a person or a thing that was a negative influence in your life. Now a positive influence. Now a life-changing influence. To put your mind at ease, everything doesn't always have to be positive to be beneficial. We learn just as much or more by how not to behave or what not to do. In addition, influence has some essential components: time, short or long, setting, characters, and readiness. What do I mean by readiness? When the student's ready to learn, there'll be a teacher there to teach them. Let me share a story to illustrate this concept that influence is inclusive. Kate Hinchcliffe, a former plastic surgery resident of ours, had a life-changing influence on me. The time was my intern year. The setting was David Grant Medical Center. The characters were just her and I on a slow Saturday on the general surgery service. I was experiencing what I would call a great deal of irritable fatigue. This issue must have been on her radar, and I must have seemed ready to have a teacher. Just for a quick reference, Kate is this big, and I am this big. So for us to have an eye-to-eye, there needed to be some repositioning. She told me to sit down because we were going to have a talk. She then quietly but intensely counseled me on my recent behavior. She continued that I was getting a reputation as brash and aggressive. She says, "That doesn't seem like you." She went on to explain that because of my gender and size, I have a natural dominance, whether I like that or not, and that she was explaining that she had a different problem altogether that she was dealing with. She suggested that I figure out how I wanted to be perceived and find a strategy for success, because without one, there was likely one outcome, and it wouldn't be the one I or anyone else would have wanted. So, like any good intern, I looked at the chief and I waited for them, pencil in hand, paper, waiting to write down this step-by-step process, how to redirect my life into a new trajectory in 3 easy steps. She didn't tell me. In fact, she walked out of the room, and we never spoke about it again. So I guess she wants me to figure it out. So I thought of how to solve this problem, and here's what I came up with. As I was frequently answering the phones or pagers as the front line of defense, I would pretend I was a customer service representative for my surgical team, and it was my duty to help the person on the other line attain complete satisfaction at all costs. I even created a script because I knew other customer service representatives had scripts. I would give the greeting of the day. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening. I'd introduce myself and identify the service I was on. This is Dr. Wishy with vascular surgery, trauma surgery, general surgery. And I'd ask, how may I help you? And then wait for them to talk. I committed to active listening and clarifying questions. And at the end, I would say, is there anything else I can help you with? And I'd wait for them to hang up. As you can imagine, at first, it was extremely robotic and cheesy. However, I was committed. I began to make some real progress with my telephone etiquette. So I applied similar concepts to other aspects of my human interaction, both at work and at home. By the way, this one interaction totally changed the way I looked at my communication skills. Kate demonstrated that influence is inclusive by showing her capacity to care about my development and how my behavior may affect others. This mattered to her more than how potentially difficult or awkward our conversation might have turned out. Now, you may say, Andrew, what she did seems really hard to do. I don't know how to do that. I guess I could maybe learn how to do that. It just seems really complicated. Misconception number 2. Leadership is complicated. Well, we've discussed already that leaders aren't born. Perhaps instead, they're made. You may think, I need to read all the books, watch all the videos, take all the courses, understand all the graphics, and have access to all the best mentors. If I do that, then I'll be a leader. Granted, all of this may be beneficial, but it's not all completely necessary. Simple truth number 2. Influence is attainable. The first thing we have to understand is that we all have influence to a certain degree. If you don't believe me, imagine a baby crying. Now imagine that baby giggling. We feel totally different about those two situations, right? Influence is a basic and powerful psychological and sociological concept. All of us have this innate desire to be liked and belong. The challenge is, as you can guess, learning how to use it. How many have heard about the concept of the right tool for the right time for the right situation? As I see it, there are just 2 basic types of tools for influence. Verbal, nonverbal, low intensity, or high intensity. Most people tend to gravitate towards certain combinations of these tools. Like painting a picture with only the primary colors. It'll just be fine for most situations, but it's not as complete a color palette like Bob Ross. Happy little tree. Let me illustrate this with 3 quick stories of 3 coaches with 3 different tool combinations and 3 different impacts. Coach Fortuna was the coach for a competitive team I played on. He recruited new players to complement a core group that he'd been coaching since they were 9 years old. I came along in my early teen years. He had this highly effective way of yelling at us, at umpires, the parents, to anyone. He even had seemed to master a skill of getting thrown out of the game at just the right moment to light a fire unto us, to rally, often to victory. This highly verbal and extremely intense tool combination was the one he gravitated to the most. Occasionally, he would break out another one, and it would have dramatic effect because it was in such contrast to his other tool combination. This one day, after we lost a game, he told us to take a knee in the outfield grass. Because he is so short, as you can see in the picture, he still stood about at our eye level. He told us very quietly, "Guys, not all of you will be professional baseball players, but you will all be professional somethings. And it is my job to teach you how to be professional. Now, hold your head up, go grab your stuff, and I'll see you here tomorrow. Tomorrow is a new day." And he walked off. In high school, Coach Peck was the complete opposite in every way. He used his tools much differently. A man of few but meaningful words, he had standards like no foul language or bad sportsmanship. One swear word and he'd pull you right out of the game no matter who you were. He was the kind of coach that when he got mad, he didn't yell. He actually got quieter. And he'd bring us in closer, so close you could see the fire in his eyes. And you could tell he meant business. He'd always end each practice or game by telling us it's not about winning or losing, but more about the process of getting better each day. Lastly, Coach Donahoe, my high school football coach, another completely different tool combination. During his first year and some of our first practices of 2-a-days, what's that, you say? Yeah, that's 2 practices a day. He did something I would never forget. We were running gassers, back and forth, 50 yards, about the width of the football field, and he'd have a standard amount that we were all required to do. But then there was an opportunity to win your way out of doing more by coming in the top finishers. Usually it'd be the fastest players, as you'd guess, and everyone else would keep going and going and going until we were all done. This one day, one of our offensive linemen named Barry, he's 6'6", 350 pounds. He finished in the top of the first heat of extras. Coach Donahoe blew the whistle, ran from one end of the field to the other on a full sprint right to where he was, and tackled him in pure joy and elation. We all joined in the dog pile, and when all the dust settled, we all took a knee. He was so excited for Barry. But we were all waiting what we thought was coming next. We were all waiting for the disappointment and discipline directed at the faster players who should have won. It never came. He didn't yell at them. He didn't shame them. He just celebrated Barry's exceptional work. That year, we went on to the first winning season, first conference championship, and first divisional championship in the last 20 years of Cardinal football. You may say, Andrew, those are great experiences. And it's not surprising they were influential in your life and development. I agree. However, I'd also argue that even great experiences don't make great people. In fact, experiences aren't even the best teacher. If so, as we age, we would get smarter and more effective. Influence is something you need to cultivate every day. Again, it's not experience alone that cultivates insight. Rather, it's the reflective evaluation of experience that cultivates experience into insight. Let me repeat this. It's not experience alone that cultivates insight. Rather, it's the reflective evaluation of experience that cultivates that experience into insight. Okay. Andrew, once I gain these insights, what do I do with them? I'm glad you asked. Misconception number 3. Leadership is limited. What do I mean by that? Just like other resources, leadership is not self-sustaining. Everyone understands the concepts of leaders and followers as the role they play in day-to-day life. However, taking the next step down the logic path brings us here. How do we replace ourselves by cultivating the next generation of leaders? I believe it centers around an illusion of control. Let me say that again. How do we replace ourselves by cultivating the next generation of leaders? Again, I believe it centers around the illusion of control. So the illusion of control means it's easier to maintain control and lead a group of followers. Everyone would agree it's more challenging and takes more skill to lead a group of leaders. I mean, who wants to try to herd a bunch of cats? Simple truth number 3. Influence is sustainable. In fact, this is the time, get out your pens and paper, because you guessed it, I'm about to reveal how do you make it sustainable. And it's 3 simple steps. The first step is in influence sustainability begins with modeling. A person should be aware of their own example, because until other people are ready to be themselves, it's easier to copy someone else. Once one person has decided to accept your model and begin to copy it, well, congratulations, you've just created a clone. But wait, don't stop there. There's more. The next step in influence sustainability is expanding your influence through teaching. There's a famous saying, give a person a fish, they'll eat for a day. Teach a person to fish, they'll eat for a lifetime. Warning, this will take investment. Have occasional misadventure, but it will all be worth it in the end. This third step is a scary step. And it's where most people stop short. However, crossing this threshold is where the exponential return on your investment will be achieved. Developing an influence culture and empowering the next generation to grow into what they were meant to become with tenets like valuing progression over perfection, or offering continued mentorship through the good and the bad. These are the things that I'm talking about. This 3-step process of modeling, teaching, and empowerment was exemplified by my college piano instructor, Yura Margulis. He's a second-generation pianist, performer, and teacher who is world famous for his skill on the piano, as well as his pedagogy. What's pedagogy? It's the method and practice of teaching an academic subject or a theoretical concept. Let me set the stage for his entrance into my life story. I started playing the piano very simply with my granny using play by colors when I was 3 years old. This grew into learning from standard piano workbooks. I suspect that because I learned how to play the piano before I could even read or understand music theory, that my strength has always been my musical ear and perfect pitch. I can hear almost any song and sit down and work up an arrangement for it. This was fun for me, as you can imagine, but it gave my piano teachers fits. When I took a famous tune, The Entertainer, sounds something like this. Da 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 dum da 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 dum da 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 dum da da dum. And I put my own twist on it. Kind of fell flat. And he said, "Oh, Andrew, oh, that's so nice. Why don't we just play it how it's written?" Over time, I grew tired of that kind of modeling and teaching. I needed something else, a better fit. I was getting frustrated, and I was about to quit altogether. Thankfully, my parents found an instructor that knew just what I needed. He began teaching me songs that he had arranged by a technique I coined parroting. He would play it, then I would play it. He would play it, I would play it, he would play it, I would play it. This is how we had lessons. There were no scales or arpeggios. There was no sight reading, no sheet music, no sonatas, no stress. Just popular arrangements to keep a young kid's interest, like themes from Disney movies, famous musicals, show tunes, jazz standards. You know, things most people would recognize. I got pretty good learning this way, and I learned hundreds of songs. I played many concerts, events, and even had regular gigs at clubs and restaurants for tip money. I even played in a Southern blues rock band named Goofyfoot that toured local clubs in Missouri and Kansas. Now, here's where Ura comes in. I'm 17 years old and playing my arrangements at the Fall Piano Scholarship Audition at University of Arkansas Piano Conservatory. The audition ends, and the chair of piano department walks over to me and my family, gives his critique, and bluntly says, "You won't be allowed into the conservatory." And he walked away. Ura, who was junior faculty, overheard this and came up to me and my parents. He told me that he saw something in me that he could work with, but he would want to explore it more. I had never been trained classically, and to have any chance at getting in, I would need to learn a classical repertoire. He offered to give me lessons and challenged me to audition again in the spring. So, my loving parents drove me from Kansas City to Fayetteville, Arkansas, every other weekend for 6 months for lessons, to demonstrate just how far Ura and I had to cover when it came to classical music training. Our first lesson was how to use your body weight to play piano instead of your fingers. I had no idea what he was talking about. My whole body to play the piano? I thought it was just my fingers that played the piano. Boy, did I have a lot to learn. We started with one note and one finger, and I played one note with one finger over and over and over and over again. And using his pedagogical Jedi mind tricks, he helped me understand and learn and accomplish what he was talking about. Spring came, and I played 3 pieces for the audition. Note, I didn't say songs, because he told me that these were pieces of art and to never call them songs again. I got into the piano conservatory under Ura. And over the next 3 years, he modeled and taught me a whole new mastery of an instrument I thought I was already pretty good at. By constantly knocking me off balance and showing me there was so much more to the piano and classical music than I could have ever dreamed of. He empowered me with the idea that progression is more important than perfection. And he'd always be available if I needed his help. So, to wrap up, I have discussed many insights on my personal journey through the 3 common misconceptions of leadership that led me to discover the 3 simple truths of influence. Some of you may think, Andrew, it sounds like leadership and influence could be more alike than different. I agree with you. However, when I started this process, I wasn't quite sure how they related. I surely didn't have the perspective I have now. As you can see, it's taken quite some time for these concepts to become clear to me. Hopefully, during this talk, I've expedited the process for you. In closing, I hope now you understand more of what leadership and influence means. It was a real pleasure to share some of the insights that have shaped my perspective on what those concepts now mean to me. Perhaps now, through reflective evaluation of this experience, you may cultivate some insight into what it may mean for you to lead by influence. So what's next for me? I've been trying to get to Arlington, Texas as a baseball player since 2003. After lots of, let's say, adventures, I'll finally make it to Texas at San Antonio as a vascular surgeon. It's clear to me, very clear, that there are so many people who've been influential in our lives. To name even some of them without the others, that wouldn't be fair. So with grateful hearts and smiles on our faces, from our family to yours, we say thank you, and we love you all very much. Thank you.
Andrew, that's really spectacular. You know, I think it's hard to describe what 6 years in a training program does in terms of changing a person. But I think your model of empowerment and teaching, and you think back to when you're an intern, and it's almost you're learning how to just touch things one at a time.
Yes, exactly.
And then so really, I think a lot of great lessons for all of us. What do you think you want to do? I'm thinking baseball, surgery. Do you think about changing course?
Well, let me tell you a quick story. So here I am, 3rd year. I don't know what it is with all the 3s. What I think it is, to be honest with you, is the greatest number there ever was is 3, because that's Babe Ruth's number, okay? So it seems like everything that's happened in my life has had some variation of 3 on it, and go figure, it was the 3rd year of surgery. I'm in the operating room with Bill Pevick. We all know him. We all love him. He looks down at my hands like it's the first time he's ever seen them, and he says, "Oh, good God, I need to teach you how to be gentle." So, my whole life I've been people have always sort of wanted me to be something else. People have sort of always thought that I should be something else. And that's okay. Everybody can have their opinion and everybody can have their vision. But, how we are and where we are and how we get there and end up there, I think this is the great fit for me. I love what I do. And right now I help a lot of veterans, I help a lot of elderly, I help a lot of people who need help, and that really is a very strong motivator for me every day to get out of bed. Also love my family a great deal.
Very special. Thank you for you guys coming to be with us today. I think that's really a fun thing. You're not the first person who has appreciated the parallels between sports, activity, music, and surgery. The concept of art, the concept of training, the concept of developing muscle memory, of using your whole body, not just your fingers. How do you stand for a 12-hour case? There are many parallels, and it's why I think we find so many people in surgery with these backgrounds. Any insight into how you now are at the pinnacle, the chief year of what is a relatively new approach to training? Vascular surgeons, cardiac surgeons, plastic surgeons, straight out of medical school. Do you have any insights that you could share with us on how do we identify people who are going to love what they do the way you have turned into this?
That's a very interesting question, because when I first started, I thought I knew I liked it. I thought I knew I was going to enjoy it. But in the real doldrums of intern year and second year, wasn't so sure. I don't know, most people probably have a similar experience, but in my reflective evaluation of this experience in its entirety, I think that for me it was a great model. I think for others it can be a great model. I still think, though, that it's very valuable for people who aren't quite sure yet that they should have access to fellowship. I think some people who want to get really broad-based, good education in general surgery first, and that's their passion and desire, they should be able to do that and still have fellowship opportunities. When we had fellowship here and the residency here, I felt like it was really good for us. And perhaps we'll go back to it at some point, maybe is my hope, but the general surgeon trainee, when they have reached their pinnacle, and then they decide to sort of pivot and do something else, I think there's a different command, there's a different understanding of sort of what they want to do, and I think our fellows, because I got to work with them, they taught us a lot about just how to be a good surgeon, how to take care of people. I think that one of the struggles and one of the challenges is in any integrated program where you're sort of learning two things at one time is how deep of a dive are you going to take in any one thing. And so if there's really any critique that I could have of integrated programs is I'd be very wary of how fast a person sort of specializes into one thing, because it's really the foundation that makes for a great building. And if you don't have a good foundation, well, it'll just all fall over. So I'm thankful that I got to have all of this, and I do feel like I've got a good foundation, and I do feel like I've been able to really build those blocks up, and they're getting nice and tall. But again, I think that would be, if I had one insight to carry away from it, that would be it.
Any questions from our video audience? There's no video. Got it. All right, we tried. No worries. Glad to have. Any questions from folks here? With that, let me just remind people it's 25 E's, 25 runs for the E schedule. E code, 25 runs. Didn't get it in the beginning. And Andrew, thank you. We look forward to, you're not completely off the hook, there's a couple more weeks, a couple more months of, we look forward to celebrating all the rest of the sort of year-end events that come our way, and look forward to taking credit for all the great things you do. Thank
Thanks.
you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Farmer. Thank you.